Hello out there, everyone, and thank you for stopping by. I'm Ed Trimnell, broadcasting to you from Cincinnati, Ohio. And in this video, and in the ones that follow, I'm going to be reading to you from No Sure Thing, a Gen X coming-of-age novel set in 1988. If we had to classify, people like to classify fiction according to genre. So I guess if we're going to classify this, we would classify this as literary coming of age slash maybe historical fiction. Yeah, the time I grew up in the 1980s, a story written that time now qualifies as historical fiction. If you are a Gen Xer yourself, or if you're interested in the young adult culture of the late 1980s, I think you'll find this interesting. This is by no means this is not an autobiographical novel by any stretch, but the setting, which is Cincinnati and the University of Cincinnati in the late 1980s, is one that I'm intimately familiar with because I was actually there. So if nothing else, I think you'll find the story to be pretty authentic. Like I said, it is some of you who have listened or read some of my other stuff that is more in the horror, suspense, mystery. It's a little bit of a change of pace from that, but there is, spoiler alert, well, let's just say there are definitely some action scenes in the book a little bit later, but it's primarily a coming of age story. Anyway, these chapters are pretty short and snappy. So I'm going to be putting these into a playlist, and without further ado, let's jump into chapter 1. Chapter 1. Scott, Peake, and I were walking across the main quadrangle together at the University of Cincinnati when that day's trouble began. One of us had already broken one of the university's rules that day. By lunchtime, we would make plans to break the law together. It was an overcast morning in December 1987. The temperature was low enough to see your breath when you went outside, but not yet cold enough to threaten accumulating snow. A sort of pre-winter, very common in southern Ohio. Christmas was in the air. In 1987, the holidays were still uncontroversial, even on a university campus. UC's red brick and concrete buildings were adorned here and there with strings of tinsel and holiday bunting. There was a restless buzz on campus, too. Only a few weeks remained until semester exams. After exams, 2 weeks of vacation. See you in 1988. 1988. In that year, I would have multiple encounters with the police. I would be involved in a dispute that would end with another man being shot. But all that lay ahead. First, I had to finish 1987. The university's main quadrangle was crowded and bustling. This was one of the chaotic 10-minute intervals between classes. Everyone, most of them students, was moving purposefully through the chilly air, hurrying to the next class or to an hour of study in the main library or the university's student center. Someone was tracking Scott and me, and that person would soon catch up with us. Scott and I were on our way to separate classes. Our paths had converged temporarily here on the main quadrangle. We'd started walking together and talking. I had just exited my Geography 101 course, taken to fulfill a general studies requirement. I was on my way to yet another economics class. Scott was on his way to one of his general studies courses, English 103, Victorian Poetry. Victorian poetry? At the beginning of the semester, Scott had assured me that a class on Victorian poetry would be filled with 90% female undergrads. It will be like fishing in a barrel, he'd assured me. Typical Scott. I overslept this morning, Scott informed me now out of the blue. I looked over at him. Scott Peake had thick reddish-brown hair and a pale complexion that resisted tanning. I did not assess Scott to be handsome, but by this time I grudgingly acknowledged that roughly half of the population disagreed with me in large numbers, the female half. You overslept? I asked him. So what else is new? Yeah, I overslept. Don't make a big deal of it. I didn't say that I robbed a bank. Did you find a parking space? This was not a frivolous question on my part. The parking situation at the University of Cincinnati was always a nightmare. The inner city campus was located just north of downtown. The student parking lots often filled up and overflowed during the peak hours. For commuter students like Scott and I, finding a parking space could be a minor adventure. The best strategy was to arrive early ahead of the other commuter students, something Scott obviously hadn't done today. I found a parking space. Scott said this with a smirk that didn't make sense given the context. Then I innovated a little. You innovated? He hesitated. Yeah, I innovated. What did you do? I asked him. Never mind. It would take too long to explain, and I don't think there will be a problem. I had known Scott since our grade school years. We had grown up together in the western suburbs of Cincinnati. When Scott said that there wasn't going to be a problem, that usually meant that a problem was on the way. December of 1987. That was indeed a wonderful time to be alive. For those of you who remember it, those of you who don't, I'll ask you to kind of take my word on that. No Sure Thing is available in Amazon in paperback and Kindle. You can also read it in Kindle Unlimited, but you're welcome to listen to the chapters here, of course. If you did enjoy this, I would ask you to hit the like button and maybe consider subscribing as well, because I would love to see you back here. Thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you again soon.